Imagine a new church. Construction begins. A grand Baroque design. It should take maybe 10 years to finish. Instead, it takes 97. Almost a century of mysterious collapses, bizarre disasters, and whispered fears. Everyone knew why. It was because of Josino, the enslaved man who built it with his own hands, only to be accused of theft with no evidence, and condemned to die without a trial. Standing on the gallows, in the shadow of the unfinished church, with a rope around his neck, he spoke words that would become prophecy. I die innocent. As proof, you will never see the towers of this church completed. The trapdoor opened. Josino died, but his curse lived for 100 years. This isn't just folklore. This is the story of the cursed towers of Porto Alegre, one of Brazil's most documented historical curses. The church is real. It stands today, bearing the scars of a century-long construction, plagued by disasters that defied explanation. This is Josino's story, a tale of slavery's unimaginable cruelty and a powerful supernatural revenge. Today we're exploring the accusation, the curse, and the surprising way it finally came to an end. Our story begins in 1807, Porto Alegre, Brazil. Was a small but growing colonial city. The wealthy elite formed a religious group, the Brotherhood of Our Lady of Sorrows, with a single grand ambition: to build a magnificent Baroque church, complete with towering twin spires. Like most major projects of the time, construction relied heavily on donated labor, which was a euphemism for the forced work of enslaved Africans. Among these laborers was a man named Josino, owned by a wealthy Brotherhood member named Domingos José Lopes. Josino was a skilled and dedicated worker who spent years of his life helping to raise the church's walls. Then, one day, something went missing. Some accounts say it was construction materials. Others claim it was a precious jewel from the crown of the Virgin Mary statue. Regardless of what it was, Josino was accused. In colonial Brazil, an enslaved person had no legal rights, no presumption of innocence, no right to a trial. The word of the master was absolute law. Domingos José Lopes declared Josino guilty, and he alone chose the punishment: death by hanging. The execution was to be a public spectacle, held at the gallows directly in front of the unfinished church Josino had poured his life into. Public executions were a brutal tool of control, designed to terrorize the enslaved population into obedience. The condemned would be marched in a procession through the city to Largo da Forca, Gallows Square, where massive crowds gathered. Almost all who died there were enslaved people, accused by their masters and executed without any real legal process. So Josino's execution day arrived. He was led through the very streets he had helped to build toward the church he had spent years constructing. The irony was crushing. The crowds gathered, the members of the Brotherhood watched, and his master, Domingos José Lopes, watched. Josino climbed the wooden steps of the gallows. The rough noose was placed around his neck. Then, in the final seconds, before the trap door opened, Josino's voice rang out. Across the square, "I die innocent," he declared. "And as proof of my innocence, my master will never see this church completed. The towers will never rise as planned the trap." Door opened. Josino fell, and in front of the church he built, he died, but his curse had just been born. At first, nothing seemed to change. Construction continued, slowly as it had before. But then, strange things started to happen. Plaster on the interior walls began collapsing without any warning or explanation. It wasn't due to structural issues. Engineers were baffled. It was as if the walls themselves were rejecting their finish. This happened over and over, year after year. Then, lightning became a constant problem. The unfinished towers were struck repeatedly, at a frequency that seemed statistically impossible. Lightning rods were installed. The towers were struck again. It was as if they were magnets for heaven's fury. History intervened, too. The Farroupilha Revolution, a massive regional conflict, erupted in 1835, bringing all construction to a halt for a full decade. When work finally restarted in 1845, the architects faced a grim reality. Every single attempt to build the towers according to the original Baroque design failed. Strange structural issues that shouldn't exist would suddenly appear. Shipments of materials would arrive damaged. Workers would fall mysteriously ill or simply refuse to continue, terrified of the curse. It was as if the very stones of the church resisted completion. By the 1890s, nearly 90 years after construction began, the church still had no towers. The community was desperate. Church leaders consulted with new architects. Their conclusion was brutal. The original design had to be completely abandoned. It was an admission of defeat, a quiet acknowledgement that Josino's dying words held power. A new architect, Giulio Waisi, was hired to create an entirely new facade in a modern, eclectic style, a complete departure from the original Baroque vision. In 1900, the Western Tower was finally completed in this new, compromised design. The Eastern Tower followed in 1901, but they weren't the grand spires from the original plan. They were smaller, simpler. A surrender. Domingos José López, Josino's master, had died decades earlier in the 1850s, never seeing the church completed, exactly as Josino had predicted. The curse had won. But just when it seemed the story was over, something remarkable happened. In 1901, the Brotherhood appointed a new prior to oversee the final touches on the church. His name was Aurelio Verissimo de Bittencourt, and he was a black priest. This was extraordinary in early 1900s Brazil, a society still grappling with the legacy of slavery, which had only been abolished a few years earlier. Father Aurelio knew the legend of Josino. He understood the pain behind the curse, and he performed a powerful, symbolic act between the two newly finished towers. He had a large iron crucifix installed. In folklore, iron was believed to ward off evil and break curses. But this was more than superstition. Here was a black priest, a man who understood Josino's suffering, placing a symbol of peace and redemption atop the cursed church. It was an act of reconciliation, acknowledging the historic wrong and asking for forgiveness on behalf of the community. After the Iron Cross was installed, the final stages of construction proceeded smoothly. All the strange accidents and mysterious setbacks stopped. The church was finally officially completed in 1904, 97 years after it began. Today, the church still stands in Porto Alegre, the city's oldest surviving church. It's been designated a national monument and even elevated to a minor basilica by Pope Francis. But more importantly, the city of Porto Alegre officially recognized Josino's story as part of its intangible cultural heritage. The legend of Josino and the cursed towers persists because it carries a truth that runs deeper than historical facts. It's a story about systemic injustice, about a world where the enslaved had no voice, no defense, and no humanity. In the eyes of their oppressors, Josino had no rights in life. He couldn't prove his innocence or stop his own execution. But in death, his words became his legacy. For nearly a century, the church itself bore witness to his innocence. Through its own incompletion, the towers that refused to rise testified to a truth that the legal system had refused to acknowledge. The Igreja das Dores is more than just a church. It's a monument to memory, a reminder that injustice leaves scars that time cannot erase, that sometimes the only justice available to the powerless is the justice they claim for themselves through prophecy. They thought they could silence Josino. Instead, they built a monument that will eternally testify to his name and their crime. They thought they were building a church for Our Lady of Sorrows. But in the end, they built Josino's memorial, and it will stand for centuries, whispering his innocence to anyone who stops to listen. Thanks for joining this incredible story. If you found it as powerful as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Until next time, remember that some debts are paid, not in gold, but in stone, and time and memory